right, everybody. How's it going? It's Stephanie MoDavis, and I'm here today with Joe Fortin. Hi, Joe.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Joe and I are going to do a video today regarding twin flames, and this is something that both him and I have a good perspective and a good amount of knowledge and wisdom around, as much as we can at this point. Joe and I are going to do something interesting today. So Joe's going to ask me questions coming from a more divine feminine perspective as an embodied male, obviously. And I'm going to share my experience with my runner energy as a divine masculine perspective in a female embodiment. And I think one of the reasons why we're talking about this today is because just very recently in my specific connection, I've come to many realizations and clarified a lot of my feelings, and I've been sharing it with my twin, who's not Joe, by the way, and really opening up about how I was wrong about a lot of things, and that my perception has evolved a lot from where it was. So there's a lot of forgiveness, a lot of healing, a lot of communication from the divine masculine coming to the divine feminine in my perspective. So, so Joe, what do you think? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I just want to just add a little bit to that and just clarify a little bit. I've said this many times in my videos. When I started making videos, well, first of all, when this connection began in the first place, like 5 years ago, I immediately went into the feminine, right? And so when I started researching twin flames and listening to what everybody had to say, people were saying things like, okay, here are the traits and qualities of the masculine, and here are the traits and qualities of the feminine, right? And whenever I would hear those, I would always be like, I'm obviously the feminine, right? This doesn't really make sense to me. I don't really know why that's the case, but it is the case. And obviously, Stephanie has identified more with the masculine, which is actually more common in these connections than one would think. We were actually just doing a little bit of preliminary sorting out of what we're going to talk about. And one of the things that I had told Stephanie was that I've seen a lot of guys make YouTube channels and make videos, right? And every single one of them that was, I guess, in the chaser energy, right? The one who's like, I have this connection with this person and I want them to wake up and, they've all initially identified as divine feminines, including myself. And so, that's a little confusing. And for guys who that is the case for, when they do move into their masculine polarity, a lot of what happens is, I've seen a lot of these guys take their entire channels down. And what happens is because of the toxic masculine programming that we have, that's like, oh, you fell in love with a girl, you sissy, oh, you're emotional, you're a sissy, all these things, right? You're not allowed to cry, you're not allowed to feel emotions, you have to be this aggressive, predator, and just all the programming that we have coming up in the collective. And well, I kind of lost my place there, but basically,
yeah, your point was talking about how there are men coming forward with a so-called chaser or feminine energy, but when you start to heal that polarization, it's almost like the vulnerability is too much and they delete their channel.
Right. Yeah. And so I actually struggled with that, where it was when I would actually shift into my masculine polarity, I would sit there and be like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I making all these videos? This girl's going to think I'm crazy, which she might, but that's okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So, where we're at right now is that Stephanie, having been more in the masculine polarity over time, has kind of come full circle. And if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're kind of moving into your feminine, to the proper gender polarity, which is what I've been talking about with the third wave. The third wave is moving into their proper gender polarities. And I think that provided that like if you're a male and you're moving into your masculine, I think this is going to be like the last like big inversion that we see. And so we wanted to talk about like what kind of realizations that Stephanie has had, you know, and you know, kind of like go into some of the mindsets that Stephanie used to have, and where she's at now with all that stuff, because the masculine perspective, the runner perspective, has kind of been like a mystery to everybody, right? Everybody knows the chaser perspective, everybody knows the feminine perspective. We've beaten it to death, right? Like we all know how the feminine feels, right? But masculine is kind of like unclear at this point. And so we want to bring some clarity to that, right? From our own perspective, which we expect will resonate with a lot of you and will resonate with the collective energy.
I want to clarify quickly when this where'd you go, Joe?
Hold on. I'll be right back.
Okay.
There we are.
There
Sorry,
right,
I had some texting me. I had to put it on do not disturb.
that's okay. So my connection started in around 2015 as well, probably about the same time that yours did, about 5 years ago. And
yeah.
So just to clarify, when it initially began, my way of being in a relationship was askew from the jump. I was married. I was in a long-term marriage when this connection started, and that marriage maybe looked somewhat healthy. So what I want to say is when this connection started, everything was a little bit askew and intense from the jump, which happens for most of us. So what happened was very immediately I noticed going into a very dramatic, intense, toxic female energy for a very short period of time. It was almost like an intense neediness, an intense intuition, so much so that it couldn't have really grounded, but I knew the connection was right. I thought we needed to do it a certain way and immediately. And what happened was that wasn't manifesting any positive way in those brief couple weeks of energy. So what had happened by, I guess, a divine orchestration was that, you know, I'm going to say God because I believe in God. God was like, all right, you went over the top in your neediness a little bit here. Now I want to show you something else. So what happened was both him and I inverted. And it was maybe a couple of months into the connection where we started communicating in a way where the first realization was very simple, was we were in an argument, right? A debate. And I thought to myself, what is this guy getting all emotional for? I thought, this is weird. He's like super dramatic. And I stepped back from myself for a minute and I thought, oh my gosh, I've just verbalized something to this man that I've heard from almost every one of my ex-boyfriends to me, which has annoyed me. So I thought to myself, I'm speaking to him like ex-boyfriends have spoken to me in ways that highly agitate me. So I could see myself turning into this kind of toxic masculine energy. And this is foreign to me. I never really understood this until you live it. But day by day, I realized, and as I started to do research, in the beginning it was kind of sketchy. I thought I was still in that feminine energy. So I want everybody to know this. This is important. Because I'm an embodied female, I still thought that I was the more awakened twin. I still thought that I was the highly spiritual twin. I still thought that I was the more advanced twin and I was the feminine. But what happened was, as time proceeded, I realized that my actual underlying dominant energy was the masculine. And I had to admit to myself at some point, I think I'm carrying the masculine energy here and he's actually carrying the feminine. And it's very obvious when we were in the polarization, because the energies were so obviously distorted when you're arguing that it was very easy to see he was like the drama queen and I was like the man who was like, I'm out of here, forget this.
Right, yeah.
I had to admit that I think I'm the masculine, which was a little awkward for me at the first because I still thought I was the more awakened twin. And that energy, I have to say, as the divine masculine, you want to call it that, it took me a long time to release that that perspective that I thought I was more advanced. I thought I was more spiritual. I thought I was more ahead. It took me a long time to face my ego and realize actually how brilliant and intuitive my feminine was. I
Uh-huh.
just was too in my ego to give him the credit that he deserved as the feminine.
Right, which is a masculine trait, right? Masculine is left brain, ego,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's a pole that we need, but if it's out of balance, it's not good.
Yeah. So what, do you have any questions from a feminine's perspective who wants to know why the masculine energy does what it does, or why it runs away? Or do you have any questions from your perspective as a feminine energy?
Well, the first question that's coming up for me um, is, at that time, how connected to your emotional body were you? Because one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of the women in this paradigm is that they're very disconnected from their emotional body. And I think that that comes from repetitive trauma and, you know, just connecting to that just being too intense and too difficult. And so they just separate themselves from it. Where were you at in terms of that?
Well, I want to tell you that there must have been an inner knowing towards this journey all along, because I got into yoga and meditation at a very young age. So I had this idea that I was a spiritual awakened person, right? It wasn't even
Yeah,
close to what hit me when this connection manifested. But
right.
what I will say regarding your question about emotions is I did have a traumatic upbringing. I had several different childhood traumas, which most of us do in these connections. And
Yep.
I did not realize my own survival strategies until I was facing this a little bit. So in the beginning of the connection, when I was polarizing into the masculine energy, I didn't realize I was practicing escapism at every corner when I felt something. I did not realize that I was running. I didn't realize, but in hindsight, I realized that this connection just highlighted the ways in which I've always been. I've always thought, oh, this doesn't work out, I'm out of here, I'll do this, forget it, I'm out. I always was looking for a reason to escape. And I always had like a plan B, and I self-sabotaged because of the extensive trauma that I had. And I did that way before this connection, but it wasn't until I faced myself for a while that I really realized how damaged I was from my past, and
Hmm.
the ways in which every relationship I've had, every job I've had, every friendship I had always had that underlying uh if I don't feel right, I got to get out of here, or that escapism, or that running, or just forget it. Like I could just door slam somebody in a second if I had had enough, because I was the type of person that was so giving, so open-hearted. And when you keep getting your heart crushed over and over again, you develop a survival strategy. So I thought, Joe, I was spiritual and connected to my emotions as a 20-year yoga teacher. When I faced this connection, it took me about a year and a half in the connection of constant communication now, right? I was fortunate and not fortunate to have constant communication with my twin almost daily,
Hmm.
which created a lot of intensity. There's a lot of purging, but it took me about a year and a half to admit to myself I was spiritually bypassing my whole life. I always wanted to run away from my shit. I always was looking for a way to escape, and I self-sabotaged almost everything good in my life, including my twin. But I didn't realize it for like a year and a half in, that I needed to do some very, very deep soul searching.
Yeah. uh, it, what you're saying is kind of hitting me a little bit. Sorry.
Okay.
um, so
I was blind. I was blind.
yeah,
I was
Yeah.
blind. It took a while for the veil to lift so I could even grasp what was happening. Because I was
Uh-huh.
so hurt. I was I was a traumatized person. I didn't realize it. All the yoga in the world, all the meditation, all the escapism, all the things I did to try to make my life good only distracted me from the real work. And it wasn't until he arrived and me admitting what I was doing to myself did I start to awaken.
Um, at what point did you realize like what your actions were like causing him to feel?
Well, good, great question. Every couple, every one of these dynamics, I think, has a slightly different mission or interest, right? We're all unique. But
Right.
for me and my divine counterpart, we manifest pain as physical problems.
Okay.
Okay, so I've had 2 kidney transplants. Okay, and in Chinese medicine, kidneys are directly related to fear.
Right. That's
So think,
true.
think of the masculine energy, fear, that much fear that I burned through 2 kidneys, that much fear. So how did I know how much I was affecting him? Because both of us would get very, very sick when we would continue to argue. And as the arguing progressed in that purging type of the purging time of the relationship, as
Yeah.
the intensity and the arguing progressed, the physical pain got worse. And it
Okay.
wasn't just soul pain. The soul pain would turn into high blood pressure, fainting. It would actually start to manifest physically. And both he and I have had very substantial health issues. And I mean, both of us have had organ transplants. That's a big
Oh,
deal. Yeah.
yeah.
And so it was something that I knew deep inside of me that the pain we were causing each other was so deep. At some point, I had to realize if I continue to run away, which there were several occasions where we had tremendous fallouts, or I just would disappear. I would just disappear for no reason. I'll give you an example quickly.
Sounds familiar.
There was one particular incident where we were able to spend a day or so together, and we had a magnificent, wholesome, beautiful day, and which was rare for us to be able to have that time together. And I dropped him off later on, and for some reason, as soon as he got out of the car, he got on his phone, and I became very, very insecure, and I for some reason, I just felt used, frustrated, abused. I just, all of my trauma came up. So we had a wonderful time. As soon as I left and I saw him on that phone, I dropped off the face of the earth. I deleted him and blocked him from every source and possible way to get in touch with me. And for no reason, just because he got on his phone after I let him out of the car, and I don't know what I was thinking. I just triggered everything. And I thought, that's it. I'm not talking to him ever again. He tried calling me several times throughout the evening, and I actually got some very, very disturbing messages from him, and he had to end up calling me from an outside source to get in touch with me. And he said, I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead. He's like, when are you going to stop killing me like this? And I realized at that moment that I had a problem, and that the intensity and the love that I had for this individual was too much for me to handle. And I was causing both of us a tremendous amount of pain. And for us, it could have been deadly. And it was almost deadly for both of us. So I had to have several occasions of, we were breaking each other's hearts. We were breaking each other's hearts. And the physical pain was turning into systemic pain, systemic issues. And at one point, I had to say, Stephanie, this was probably about 2.5, 2 years in. And I had to say, I either have to really fully let this go, or I have to be in this, in the discomfort, in the imperfection, and agree to not run away from this individual, or I'm going to kill him, or I'm going to end up dying myself because the pain is manifesting physically.
Right. I had another question pop up.
Mm-hmm.
What was there anything that he could have done differently, or was it really just an inside job with you?
Okay, great question. So at that time, when I was a little more in an unconscious energy, yeah, there was things he could do different. I'm gonna have to go back into that energy, and I'm already feeling myself getting a little bit kind of frisky and arrogant, and a little bit rowdy. Is he wasn't giving me what I wanted, what I thought was needed in the connection. So there were factors that were keeping us apart, and I had this attitude that spiritually I felt as though if this connection were to happen, that all of the external elements that were keeping us apart would fall into its right place. And I'm not saying that I don't believe in that. I don't want to purposely hurt anybody, but I did have a knowing that if we followed through with this truth, everything would eventually be okay. Okay. But what happened was I became very impatient. I wanted to control things, and I started to want to run the show. So I started to turn into this kind of bitchy type of energy that, he wasn't doing his part in my eyes. There was a level of impatience I had. There was a level of, why doesn't he see that this is the right thing to do, and he's not moving accordingly? And he was also hurting me simultaneously by not giving me what I want, which triggered obviously a lot of myself to address my inner child, mommy and daddy issues at that time.
What exactly was it that you wanted?
He wanted things to unfold organically.
Okay.
He wanted things to continue and just unfold. And I wanted to control the process. So you can see very clearly where he was more in an intuitive state of mind, and he felt as though something's happening. I can feel this, I can see this, and I know at a specific place and time that this may manifest. But I, all of a sudden, I could see it as well, but I took that knowing into control, which was my masculine energy.
Right.
So things weren't happening at my rate of speed the way I wanted them to, and I started to resent him for that. And then because he wasn't giving me what I wanted and feeding my distortions,
Mm-hmm.
I started to question my self-worth, question the relationship. I started to become very insecure then. And obviously we have a lot of polarity in our connection, as many people do. So there was a lot of things for me to trigger my self-worth and everything else. So the fact that he wasn't giving me what I needed was pissing me off. It was challenging my control. It was challenging everything I believed in. I was thinking, why isn't this happening? God showed me this, and now it's all distorted and screwed up, and it's not easy.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to run, because it wasn't easy. And I wasn't getting what I wanted. I really was being a stubborn little brat. I wasn't getting what I wanted. So then I thought, all right, screw this, I'm out of here. But then every time I kept trying to leave, the pain would be worse. The soul crush would be worse, and the physical manifestations would become worse. So I had to, at some point, really just drop to my knees and, for the millionth time, surrender again, surrender more, and just say, you gotta just see what God has planned here. Stop trying to micromanage it. Stop trying to control it. Stop trying to run from it. You can't run away from it. I mean, there came a point where I had that clear realization a couple years ago. I can't get away from this. And I'd even say to him, like, why won't you go away? Why won't you just go away. I said it in not such a nice term, but it was
Yeah,
a joke, but it was true, because it just doesn't go away. Nothing goes away, right? Until it teaches you what you need, or until whatever happens is supposed to happen. So
that's right.
a
Hmm.
million times of surrender until I realized I can't run away. But that just took me to my next level of healing, which was about 2 years ago. So I had
Mhm.
to first just admit this wasn't going away and I wasn't going to run. But then
Right.
that took me to the next level of healing of how do I love somebody unconditionally who's not giving me what I want still? Like, how do I do this?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And it's all a divine process, right? Because
Right.
it may have happened if I was in the right place or he was in the right place. So obviously there was things that still needed to be worked out and healed. And, to this day, I honestly do not know exactly what's going to happen, but I have a
Right.
very clear feeling. And I'm honored to be on this journey, and I'm not going anywhere. And I'm very happy to say that we have come to a place where we're friends and we talk very often, almost daily check-in, and it's the appreciation of the connection above and beyond any wants, desires, or needs to control any of the outcome. So
Yeah.
that's a very beautiful place to be. And in fact, perhaps is this the union? Is this the union coming? And I see some people try to say, well, this is when you know that union is coming. Well, he's still in his circumstance and I'm still in mine, but the union definitely for me has manifested within. Now where that goes proceeding from here, I don't know. Is that a precursor to something else, or union with him, or union with another, or not, or whatever? I don't know, but it has led into that union within, for sure.
Right. Right. Um, in terms of I wanted to just add a little bit to the unconditional love idea. I'm sort of on the fence with that idea, and I'll explain why. I see it as somewhat paradoxical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, with this person, I mean, I'm gonna say right now, regardless of like what has happened,
Mm-hmm.
I have always loved her unconditionally. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there have been boundaries that I needed to set. There were a lot of boundaries I didn't set that I should have.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of ways in which I didn't respect myself enough to set certain boundaries and say no to certain things that I should have. Um, but also, I feel as though, and I've talked about this on my channel before, they're mirroring you. So if you have abandonment wounds that are still, still there under the surface, you're a vibrational match to that. And so they're going to trigger that for you. And when you purge that energy out and you no longer have that emotional energy underlying and it's not in your field anymore,
Mm-hmm.
the behavior seems to stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so paradoxically, it's like, yeah, you love them unconditionally, but yet when you actually let go of the thing that if you feel wronged by, they stop wronging you. So in other words, at that point, the conditions for love start to be met. You know what I mean? In a sense, because they're actually behaving in a way that's conducive with it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely get on board with that, and usually that can turn into another circumstance that needs to be addressed, right? I
Yeah.
mean, for me, there was layers upon layers of issues, and there would always be the love, for us it would always be the connection, the blow up, the healing, and the purge, and then it would repeat. That cycle would repeat over and over again, and it was like we'd get a breath of fresh air, and it was actually cute because we'd actually emoji each other like a celebratory, like emoji, like a party emoji, like, yay, we made it through this one. And as soon
Yeah.
as we would do that, the next one would come up. That it's different now. It doesn't really come up like that for us anymore. And I'm not saying that there's no more issues, because there's always something. But I
Yeah.
think just the state in which we're at right now is this harmonization state in the level of connection that we're in, which is a friendship. So there's a tremendous amount of respect for each other. And in particular with me now, coming through the healed masculine energy and really embodying a very mature feminine principle, right? I can definitely feel that emanating from me. And I will be very honest that when I settle into this energy wholly, it affirms with the connections I have externally. So what I'm saying is I'll have a lot more interactions from men when
Yeah.
I'm in more of a feminine energy, and not a provocative thing, just a very respectful, like, hi, how are you
Yeah.
doing? Like something like there's an interaction or a safety that maybe a man feels around me, and
Hmm.
they'll just kind of come out of the woodwork when I'm in this balanced feminine energy, right?
Right.
Again, not in a dirty way, but in a respectful way. So,
Sure.
very lately for me, it's been about, as the masculine coming into her feminine and seeing things from a higher perspective, is realizing and saying to my feminine how much I value him, how much I respect him as a man, embracing and him too, because I'm coming into this energy. I see him more now in a very strong masculine energy.
Right.
So now I'm saying to him, I respect you. I value you. I thought that I was more awakened and I was spiritual and I was bypassing all of this evidence you gave me to show me how incredibly intelligent and intuitive you were, because I was focused so much on myself and my own ego. So there's a tremendous healing going on right now in my connection, where it's just an expressiveness as a feminine to a masculine, and really showing him how much he's valued and how much he's needed here, really, in a society where we have all this neo-feminism. And with our particular connection, the healing, the inversion of the genders is very, very important for me, because we've really, really worked this very, very deeply. And now
Yeah.
coming into my feminine, I can see when I need to be in more of a masculine. I can identify with that right away by how I eat, how I dress, how I act. And when I'm in more of a feminine, and my needs and how I eat and want to dress and act, when I'm more in my feminine, dependent on whatever's going on or whoever I'm being in that day. But
Yeah.
the poles are much less, they're less broad. So I can tell, oh, I'm a little more in my masculine today, or I'm a little more in my feminine today. But it's not as polarized. It's literally like the brain hemispheres really connecting and working together without so much opposites.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. I think that like where I'm at with it is that when I'm fully balanced, my internal like feminine energy will be balanced,
Mhm,
and that'll be something that I'll fully be able to access.
mhm.
But generally what I'll be exuding is masculine energy. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Mm. So
I would want to say one thing really quick, Joe, about that, because this is important. As I proceed on my healing journey with this, is if I'm around somebody, I'm going to use an example here. If I have a particular friend in my life who has an energy that's a little bit complex for me to be around, and I see myself go more into a um, too much of an imbalanced masculine energy when I'm around him, because
mm,
it's me always trying to harmonize with the other who I'm with, right? So
right.
I can see how that particular relationship, friendship, isn't that positive for me because of where my energy wants to be around him. So it's like everybody in my life is giving me very specific clues now, besides just a feeling of, oh, I don't feel good around that person. It's because I can see what my energy does around each individual. And I know where the balance point lie. So, still having to rearrange my external circumstances to where I can take in the outside and still be balanced on the inside.
Right. Right. Um, there were a couple more questions that I had,
Mhm.
and I'm kind of blanking out. Um,
Any more questions about the runner?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
that's
the runner.
like those times when you like just completely like disappeared.
Mhm.
What was going through your head like while you were away? Like what kind of things were you feeling? Were you thinking about him, or were you just like completely, did you completely shut it down?
I did both really well, and almost simultaneously.
Yeah.
So I, first of all, I never ever stopped thinking about him. Never, never,
Hmm.
never,
Yeah.
ever, ever. So he was always there. Would I try very, very desperately to get him out of my head and do stupid things to try to forget about him? Yes, I would.
Been there.
But he
Yeah.
never went away. So in my times where I was running, it was so much pain because I was in the energy of, I freaking hate this guy. Why doesn't he go away? I'm going to do anything I can to forget that he exists. And oh my God, I can't live without him at the same time. So it
Yeah.
was so much confusion and so much distortion and so much opposing forces. My head and my heart were like in this. He actually said this to me once: my head and heart are in an epic battle.
Yeah. No,
And that's
I
what it
get that
was.
too.
When I'd run away, I was so like, just, it was like I was fighting myself. And it wasn't until I would have to drop to my knees and surrender every time,
Right.
because I couldn't handle the polarity of toxic emotions, of me
Yeah.
avoiding myself and me facing myself.
Right. What were you exuding to him? Were you just like stone faced, like not showing him anything? Like
I try to be tough. I try to be a know-it-all. I was probably cocky and arrogant. I know a couple times he would say, "Oh, you are just so righteous," and I'd be like, "Oh, of course, because I know it all." Like again, I kind of was like in this mentality that I was spiritually advanced.
right.
Do you see how
Right.
distorted that is? And I see that play out in
Yeah.
the collective. I'm having a very difficult time recently really connecting with the quote unquote spiritual world, because when I was in the spiritual world, I see now where I actually was, and it's scary.
Yes.
Scary.
Yes. 100% agree with that one. Yep. That's why, I mean, like I talk to you and
Mhm,
I've got a couple other people that I talk to,
mhm,
and that's about it.
mhm.
you know?
Now listen,
Uh,
I try not to judge because I've been there. So
yeah.
I see the healing that's going on. And I'm not saying that I won't ever go back there. I don't know what exactly the
Yeah.
future holds, but
And we still
what,
have steps to take too. I mean, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But what I will say is that when I was in that energy to him, I would try to, I would do one of these. Well, he's just clearly not enlightened enough yet, and he doesn't have the knowledge that I do, and he doesn't have the wisdom that I do, and well, he'll find out for himself. He'll struggle, he'll suffer, he'll this, he'll that. Like just pushing it all onto him, and just
Right.
not ever wanting anything to harm to come to him. Although I will admit, and I know that he's in our connection, there has been at times like, would it be easier if he checked out? Would it be easier if I checked out? Would it be easier if we both just checked out? Like that, those thoughts go through your mind because it is that intense and it's that difficult.
Yeah.
And you feel guilty as hell even thinking of that, but it's so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
But I was so deeply struggling when I would do that to him. And again, I was in a very arrogant, very spiritually arrogant mindset. And a very
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, he may have more of X, Y, and Z than I do in the material world, but I have it going on spiritually, and he'll learn his lesson and he'll struggle and he'll wake up one day and I won't be there. And it just that
Yeah.
crap. Like that would make me somehow feel better,
right.
but it didn't. And that's when I really realized this version of spirituality that I'm holding needs a ton of work.
Right. Yeah. Um, what did it take, like, for you to finally like snap out of it? Like, what did it take for you to make that like turn around? from thinking that you were all that to like realizing, oh my God, like he's actually the one who like, you know, is the more compassionate one, the, you know, the more advanced one, you know what I mean? And this whole time, like I've thought that he was, you know, stupid. Like what point did you have that realization?
Mm, I think I had the major realization probably about 2 years in, where around that same time frame that I told you, where we had that beautiful time together, and then I just cut him off. I kept doing that, and then during that particular time, I cut him off, and it wasn't just a few months later that he actually started to have very, very life-threatening health issues. And it was coming from a genetic condition that we both knew at some point might lead to this. Um, Obviously, I can't disclose everything. It would make a lot more sense, but I will say that he was on his way out, and it had a lot to do with the health of his heart. And I realized that my heart, I was breaking my own heart in lying and running. I was breaking his heart, literally and figuratively. And I really realized I better mature real quick, because I could potentially lose him. And that almost happened several times in 1 year, and where there were really severe issues with cardiac arrest, and like very severe, like this was a very severe case. And I had to wise up quick, and I had to say, you know what, I have to control my emotions and wake the beep up, or he's not gonna put up with this at some point, because his circumstance is so delicate, and he has a very important career, and he has a lot weighing on his shoulders. And I thought at some point he's not going to want to deal with this. But I will say that with everything he had on his shoulders, including his own physical health, uh, he still was always there. He was always there. He never went away. It was always me.
Yeah.
He never left me. I don't feel in 5 years that ever once he left me. Even though he wasn't giving me what I wanted, he was always there. I'm sure he would say not the same for me. I tried to leave him many, many times.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted to, because I wanted things to be different than they were. Instead of just accepting what was happening.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the classic case, highly polarized, different. He's 15 years older than me. He's got a very different career in life than I do. There's a lot of opposites, a lot of polarization. So the journey was very hard. We could not avoid the runner chaser phase. There was way too much stuff to deal with. There was
Yeah.
too much drama. And,
I get that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
In
kudos to
some
those twins
cases,
who don't have runner and chaser, but for the highly polarized cases, it's kind
yeah.
of inevitable.
I think that's rare, honestly, for people to not have that.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that it can't happen. I mean, I know that it's possible, totally possible. But I think that for most people, it is kind of necessary.
Yeah, yeah,
You
and
know,
I
if you read,
think it's okay. I don't think we need to demonize it. I mean, people who have a lot to deal with, and I will say this, because you and I have had a couple of conversations off camera, is that in the times where we had to take kind of a separation from texting or phone or something like that, where I remember the first one, we were like, we need 10 days to not speak to each other. And that was like bone crushing to not speak to him for 10 days. Like I barely could do it. But
yeah,
even the times where we've had separation, and even this time where there's not an intimate connection, there's a respectful friendship, there's a foundation laid that's very different. I've grown the most without him being with me more. So in the beginning of the connection, there was a lot more phone time and a lot more physical, seeing checking up on each other and seeing each other. But now there's been a couple of years primarily because of a lot of things he's been through with his health and circumstances. But I've only seen him once this year, and I think once or twice last year. But we talk almost every day, check in. But I've grown like mad in the past 2 years. And, would I love to have him more in my life? Yes. And I hope that happens. But I realize how the separation for me personally was needed. As much as I was fighting it, I didn't want separation. That's why I would get frustrated and just leave, because I so desperately wanted it to be different. But I did learn immensely in my time away from him, because he's so fantastic and he's so distracting, and it is hard to really do the work when you're just like, you're either totally loving on someone or you're not getting along. It's really hard to go within.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I think, I've thought about that recently as well. Where it's like, if I had been around this person 24/7, would I have focused on my work? Would I have done what I needed to do? Would I be like really on my mission here? Or would I just be like, you know,
Yeah.
wrapped up in them? And, I think that for a long time, the answer is I would have just been wrapped up. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? I would
sure.
have just wrapped up in her. And I think that I did need to get to a place, where it's like, okay, I can have some balance with this, and I can do what I'm here to do, which is what we're doing right now. And have some balance with that, right? Because I mean, the last, relationship that I had, it was a little bit too imbalanced into the, I'm totally wrapped up in this girl and I can't get my shit done,
Well,
and
well, that's a huge problem in the old school paradigm of relationship, is the codependency, and that's one thing too that I realized, and I, again, because the twin can reflect pretty much your entire life. As we were going through this dynamic, I realized how codependent I was in my past relationships, and taking time apart, and even focusing on myself, which was almost more obsolete. So if we were to come into a physical connection now, after all of this time apart and all this healing, I'm a completely different person than I was when I started. I'm a completely different
oh
person
yeah,
than I was 2 years ago.
too.
And I'm a much healthier functioning individual to be in a interconnected and an interrelationship with somebody where we're working off of each other, and I like my own space now. Like, I'm completely different, and I think I could hold a really healthy relationship now.
Yeah, yeah. I think, honestly, like, it's weird because there are certain aspects of like what you're talking about where it's like I'm identifying with you and what you're saying, right? And I'm like, that's me,
Mhm.
right? And then there's other aspects of what you're saying. I'm like, no, that's her,
Yeah,
right?
I think
And
because I really I go back and forth with a pretty good understanding at this point, because I see that too. I'm like, sometimes I can relate to the feminine, and sometimes I can relate to the masculine.
yeah, and I think we all do that.
Yeah,
I think we
definitely.
really do all do that.
I think it's
Um,
a level of understanding, though. I think that there's a level of self-work that does need to be done for you to have that recognition,
oh yeah,
both of the energies.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I've been talking about on my channel. It's just like, you really do have to do the work. There's no way around it. There's no avoiding it. There's no avoiding this connection. Like, once this has been initiated, right? Once you've been set on this path, like, yeah, you can physically avoid the person if you want to, but like, you're not avoiding the energy of it. You're not avoiding the connection. You are going to face yourself. And you know what? Like, yeah, it's hard to do and it's hard to do the work. But if you just put your nose to the grindstone and do it, like, the really hard shit is going to be over pretty quickly, like within a couple of years. But if you avoid it, like, you can stretch this out for 20 years if you want to. People have done it, like,
It depends. I think there's a level of this connection from my experience that where ultimately there is a surrender to the divine orchestration of it, because I do,
yeah,
there are twins who go back and forth for 30 years, and I think that it depends maybe on what the couple's meant to do, or what the
Sure.
couple, like, what does God want? Does God want you guys, like, is it in your destiny to do this for 30 years, or do you guys have to get your shit together because there's something that needs, like other people and factors have to somehow be in accordance with this all too. And that's one thing really that I had to realize, which you know, is that everybody in your life, everybody in her life or his life is all a part of this. And, you
Yeah.
know, as you start to really broaden your awareness and understand this, is that, you know, in the beginning stages, you want what you want. And you really got to let go, because there's way more at hand here and way more at play. And it's so much more layered and complex than what you
Yeah.
want. And
That.
now my ego's gone. So where I live now is, do I still love him and desire him? Absolutely. Do I still think about him every day? Is within me? Yes. But we are not in a physical union. We're in a friendship. We're in a very good foundational friendship right now, which I think needed to happen. It was kind of like a wiping the slate clean and starting fresh from a healthy place. I think both of us felt that at one point. We were like, we're either going to burn this out, or we really have to start fresh at like a very fundamental, healthy, foundational friendship.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at. And I don't know what the future holds. Do I know what I want and what I feel like I know? Yes. But I do every day surrender to the divine. And I put, why am I here and what am I meant to do in accordance to God's grace, over what I want and need. So if it's a part of my journey, I embrace it. But it's almost like, what am I meant to do here as a sovereign individual?
Right.
And if he needs to be involved with that, or are meant to experience that heaven on earth and that pleasure again, so be it. But I also live in a space where I better best be as authentically aligned as possible each day, because I'm better to humanity and myself when I live there. And
Right.
anything else that comes to me is really, it's a bonus for me now, because I do have
Right.
this wholeness within me, and I can survive not being in a relationship with him. Do I
Yeah.
want that? Do I want it to be like that? No, I don't. But I can survive, and I can genuinely say, this experience has blown me away. I am so humbled and grateful. I'm a completely different person. My husband, who I was married to for 15 years, we spoke just the other day briefly, and he said, you've turned into somebody that is no resemblance to the person I knew. And I said, you're right, because I did such a good job at hiding all of my trauma and faking the person then, that of course you wouldn't recognize me today, because I'm actually whole and real and authentic and healed. I'm balanced.
Right.
But I did such a
And I
good
think it's
job at
huge.
faking it.
Yeah, no, I think that's so huge. I made a video the other day about just being authentically you. Like, no one can love you unless you are you. Like, unless you're showing them you. You can,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, if people love you and you're not showing yourself, or you're being fake, like, they're just falling in love with your mask.
Yeah,
They're not even
yeah,
getting to see you, right?
yeah,
So yeah, that's super important.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, we build walls to keep people out because of trauma, and I've done that, totally, and I've seen a lot of other people do it.
yeah.
Um,
You know, Joe, I wanted to say what you just said there about we do put on masks, is my husband. When I first met him, I was in my early 20s. He was like a really cool deadhead, like outdoorsy, like super good looking, charismatic guy. I was not into a lot of the things that he was into at the time, but we clearly had an attraction. And I remember saying to myself, and tell me how screwed up this is, I thought, I am just gonna try to like and do everything he likes and be the cool chick and never like go against anything he says. And I
yeah.
created my whole marriage around that facade. Now, did I start to enjoy things that he did? Sure. But basically, I entered the relationship saying, I'm going to be fake and let's see how this works.
Yeah, and of course that's never gonna work.
That's why he says today,
But
you don't resemble anything like I knew you to be, because I wasn't real
yeah,
from the jump.
And interestingly, where I was sort of more codependent and, more in my feminine to begin with, I actually did that too. I would meet a girl and like figure out what she liked, and like, I'd start listening to that kind of music, or, doing what doing or whatever, I don't do that anymore, but it was the same thing, right? And I at this point, I don't even, for me, it wasn't a conscious thing. It was just, yeah, I just did it, but yeah, I wouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Towards the end of my marriage, I mean, we had a pretty good relationship. But towards the end of the marriage, I could feel my soul getting stirred, that like, first of all, I could feel something coming. And, this goes back to like, signs and symptoms of your twin flame. I could, for
Right.
6 months to a year before I met him, I would even say to my husband, I'd say, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. So, like, I could feel this stirring. And about that time, there were some complexities arising in my marriage. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard that people say or suggest, if the marriage is meant to collapse, it will do it organically. And that actually started to happen in my connection, in my relationship, maybe unbeknownst to him. But what happened was I started to rebel. To my husband. So all the things he liked to do, I started to want to do the opposite, or come into my own sovereignty, because my soul was like, hey, like, you got to start to learn how to be yourself here, because I'm going to show you something soon that's going to really, really, blow your cookies. So
Yeah.
I saw how I was rebelling to my husband to try to reclaim what I had lost or given away the entire marriage. And that was creating a little rift between us.
Yeah.
And then it was about a year later that I came in contact with the twin. And in fact, as harmonious as we are now in a friendship, what I will say is, it's a delicate balance of me still aligning with my true self and what's right. And like I said, being aware of the energy I'm around, and realizing this person really triggers my alignment, or I'm in an unhealthy energy, and really committing daily to do what's best for me and put
Yeah.
myself first. Now, interestingly enough, with that is, there's kind of two schools of thought. It's kind of like service to others or service to self kind of thing. I think it depends a lot on who the personality was and is previously. So for me, I would people please at my own life's expense. There's no doubt about it. I would sacrifice myself to please other people. So for me, coming into my sovereignty and choosing myself and permitting myself to experience pleasure and what I want and desire has been a true life's work for me. And it's
Yeah.
not selfish. It's just that I never permitted myself to receive. It seems like the masculine. It's
Yeah.
like I've never permitted myself to receive. So I think
Right.
the masculine now is coming into this place, and I'm seeing it collectively, is the masculine is coming into this place where they know they've sacrificed themselves for others. They know that they've tried to do what was right in terms of what society says or their programming. They've realized the health benefits that it's caused them, and the mental and internal stress and frustration. And I think they're trying to now say, I want to receive some pleasure myself, because I've sacrificed all of myself for my family or my wife or my this or my that, who maybe doesn't really show them the proper love back, but they still
Right.
gave it. So for me, definitely is this, hey, you know what? I actually do deserve to be happy. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It took me a long time to get there myself. I didn't think it was possible. When
To
I went to see my hall counselor, which is the healing modality that I'm using now, I don't remember saying this, but we talked about this about a month ago. And she was like, when you walked in my door, she was like, you were like the most defeated man I'd ever seen. Like, she was just like, you just literally looked at me and you were like, I don't have any hope for having a normal life. I don't have any hope for, you know, dealing with my addiction issues. Like, I don't have any hope of ever being like in a good relationship. Like, I'm just totally done. Like, do you actually think this will help me? And, she was like, yeah. And she was like, and look at you now,
Mhm.
So yeah.
I think this offers great hope for the masculine, and obviously great hope for the feminine, who's been so delicately just there. And you know what I'd like to say to the feminine. Let me tell you what I recently said to my masculine then feminine counterpart. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
a love letter to my feminine
Hmm,
is
okay.
thank you for always being there. um, Thank you for being the one person who's never left me and abandoned me. I'm gonna get emotional saying this.
I'm getting
um,
emotional right now. I'm
yeah,
trying to cut my
yeah,
shit together.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for always believing in me. um, Thank you for tolerating my shit. Hmm. That was a huge one. um, Thank you for loving me in a way that I've never experienced. I know a way that I never knew was possible. Loving me in a way that actually would stay with me. I think there was so much trauma of abandonment and neglect, and not unconditional love, and you know, there was a lot of deep trauma, but really honestly, that's more so what I'd like to say is thank you for never leaving. Thank you for tolerating my shit. Thank you for tolerating my arrogance, because at times I was a real dick. uh, Thank you for yeah, just loving me in a way that I never knew existed and showing me something that I never knew were possible. That's what I'd like to say to all the feminines out there.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for,
now
yeah.
you're seeing. I see you now. I see you now. I really see how you are strong and you are intuitive and you are balanced and you are wise. You're wise. I feel the wisdom. I feel the wisdom. And and you humbled me. You humbled me because I thought I had it all figured out and I really didn't.
Yeah. Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I probably could go on, but I'll start crying. So, but I think
Yeah.
feminine deserves to hear all those things, you know. And I think once this is expressed in connections and collectively, the relaxing into the true gender will happen. Because
Yeah.
as I say this, as I speak this, I can feel me feeling very comfortable in my powerful, beautiful, graceful feminine, and I can feel him and my respect for him as that beautiful, wise, strong man.
I
It
think
flipped us.
the the appreciation aspect of it is really, really huge. Like, um, like hearing that from you, even though, I'm not actually, you know what I'm saying? Like it was kind of like,
Hmm.
you know, I'm imagining that happening.
Yeah.
Um, but it was just like, I thought to myself, like, how amazing would it be if I actually heard those words someday? You know what I mean?
You know
Like,
what's
hey,
interesting? What you
I
just
appreciate you. Like
you know what's
that would mean
interesting?
so much, like it really would though. It means so much, because like from my point of view, right? Like I have worked so hard, right, to become, the man that I always knew that I could be, right? And like, I've always had this vision in mind, and like, I've let go of it having to be with that one particular person, right? But it's still there, you know what I mean? Like, there's still things that I see in my mind's eye, and there's things that I want, right? And like, I have like just given everything that I have, right? And it's like, man, like, when when am I gonna get some kind of return on this? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not even just, I'm not like pointing the finger at, her or whatever, but like just like God, like, hey, like, is this how it's supposed to be? Like, am I Job here? What's going on? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was so interesting how you just said, if I could hear that appreciation. And I heard from somebody a while ago, I forget who, but they said it's the feminine that needs the appreciation, and it's the masculine who needs the respect. And I think it's aspects of both. I think that both need both. But it's interesting there
Yeah.
how you just said you were seeking appreciation. So it is still, you can still see how the energies are working. And
Right.
because now I feel that too. I feel as though I want to just respect him and just help him on his mission. And it's like I want to just be appreciated for being that in the female role. And this is one thing that I would love to talk about more. It is embracing a more traditional female role in a relationship. Is that something that
Yeah.
happened to me? It's like all of a sudden I didn't want to be an entrepreneur anymore. I didn't want to run my own business. I didn't want to be the empowered woman. I wanted to
Yeah.
I wanted to be the wife. And this was so foreign to me.
This is what I've been talking about too. I've been talking about traditional relationship roles and just traditional way of doing things, and
Yeah.
because that's literally, that is what feels right to me. I don't care about all this modern crap that everybody's trying to push and trying to, turn women into CEOs. I mean, if they want to do that, like, all more power to you.
Sure.
Live and let live, right? Do what you want. But like, in terms of the type of woman that I would like to be with and be around, that I don't want to be with a woman who's like all gung ho, like, like, I just
Yeah.
don't want. It does not sound sexy to me. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
uh,
I think again, like you, I'm on the same. I think the same way you do here is if that's in your agenda, that's your repertoire, then grow for it. Be a CEO, be a powerful woman, do your thing. I think that's
yeah,
great. And at one
yeah,
point, to me, that's what I thought I had to be because that's what society trained us all to be. And
right,
what I will say is that it was such a beautiful feeling at some point, and I envisioned some corny picture, probably from like Little House on the Prairie or something, but all of a sudden I saw myself nurturing my husband and being there for him and his role, and just something about that felt like home to me. And I just was like, not saying that I wouldn't work or I don't want to work, but I'm saying I wanted to have those more traditional roles, and nothing felt so beautiful to my heart and my body to be able to support him as much
right,
as I could
yeah,
and let him lead. I
yeah.
don't
Well,
need to lead. I don't need to lead. He can
that's
lead.
another
That's
thing.
okay.
That's another thing. Every woman that I've talked to,
Mhm.
because I know a couple of women that are like on your level, right? That are on this level of operating here, and they all say the same thing, right? I want a man who leads,
Yeah.
and like, I want to be. I mean, I have a friend that I talk to all the time, right? Who's literally said the exact same things you just said, right? And
Mhm.
it's like women that come into their feminine, right, that have gone through the process of like purging out all the trauma and all the bullshit, right? They eventually get to that place where they're like, you know what, like, I want a real man, and I kind of just want to be like a wife. You know what I mean?
But
Like,
I want to clarify. When I say, or if I were to say I want a real man, what I mean is not because I want to mooch or not contribute. Like that has
oh
nothing. It's because I
yeah,
so desperately I want to help nurture the unit
right,
and have that role of us. Like if you were to say to me, hey, can you drive me here? Or can you do this, take on this masculine role? Of course, I know how to do that. But
yeah,
in terms of the overall energy would be, how can I help to nurture you, to nurture us together? And,
right,
and
right,
and how can I help you? How can I help
yeah.
you? Because I like
It's
to
there,
help. I like that.
there's an equal amount of work,
Hmm.
and in terms of like, like the overall like decision making process, like, this is going to be really interesting, right?
Hmm.
So the man needs to lead, right?
Hmm.
But the one of the number one factors in whether a relationship survives long term
Hmm.
is whether that man is willing to take direction from the woman, right?
I think in how things have evolved in how we communicate is him honoring more so my feminine wisdom,
Right,
because some of it's out there, some of it hasn't yet completely grounded, right? So
right,
to honor, and which he has said to me before, oh, you have immense gift of intuition, almost prophetic, and sometimes it's hard to believe that.
yes,
So for him to believe that what I'm feeling is for the best, It's the best, and for us to
Right.
communicate that. And then for him to take that into the world and apply proper action. One thing that I heard on this guy on YouTube that I watch, and he says it kind of interestingly, and he triggers a lot of people. He has a program
Hmm.
called rebuilding the family man, right? I
Okay.
don't know who
I
this
haven't.
is. But anyhow, he says that the natural order of relationship should be man under God, woman under man, children under woman. Okay.
Okay.
So it's a little bit, it's kind of similar to what we're saying, but it's kind of like God holding the principle, man holding the principles of really connecting with God as
Yeah.
the father, and then the woman under the man, listening to the man's, because she's trusting her man, because he's under the father, under natural law, and then
Hmm.
the children under the mother. So again, it can't always be that way, but I like trusting my man. I like putting him at the wheel. I like offering and saying, hey, I trust your choices.
Right.
I'm with you. I'm on your side. And I think so often now in relationship, they're always fighting each other. The woman wants to be right. The guy's kind of giving up. He's in his beta energy, and it's all that distortion is so heightened. We know that, but then
Hmm.
it's like for some reason the women are hesitant to let the man lead. Maybe that's because there are so many men in the beta energy, and
There are.
how do
Yeah.
we as individuals who've gone through this purging and this process help other individuals to listen to what we've experienced and to help them open their minds to this concept and how beneficial it can be? Because
Well.
I'll tell you, I tried to hold a workshop on neo-feminism and healing the inauthentic woman several years ago, and I was called an anti-feminist. So I'm
Right.
realizing, like, how do I help people come into this energy that may actually feel much more nurturing for them? I know so many women who are
Right.
burnt out. So many women can't, a woman is not meant to always hold the masculine principle. So just
No, not at all.
consider what we're saying, so you could live a life where you're really efficient and productive, and you're
Right.
not less than because you're embodying your feminine principle.
Right. Right. Well, that's part of the distortion, is that, that looking at it as less than, which it is not.
Complement.
And terms of like the God, man, woman, children, I think that there's something to that, but I also think that that's one dimensional. I think there's something
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah.
I think that there's another element, because first of all, looking at God, the creator, right, as a masculine energy only, I think is misguided.
Right.
um, yeah, I think that there has to be a feminine principle
Yeah,
and
I agree.
balance that. And I think that honestly, like if you were to look at, I think the feminine comes first, actually, in terms of creation, right? Because the
Well,
feminine
yeah,
callous, the feminine is, what actually gives birth to everything, really. Feminine is the matrix, right? The matrix is,
stipulation.
so the construct is feminine, the energy within it is masculine, right? But what was I had a point that I was going to make on what you were just saying.
We were just
Um,
talking about coming into your proper agenda and how do we do this in a way
oh,
that's
yeah. So in terms of like, for men,
Mhm.
men need direction. Men need mentorship. Like men
Yeah,
need
me
to be
too.
taught by other men. They need to be in masculine energy. That's why in tribal cultures, like when the kids get to be when they're about, when they're born to about 7 or 8, right? They're with the mother, right? The mother's taking care of them, right? The boys get to be about 7, 8 years old, 10 years old. They go with the men to learn
Right.
how to be men.
Right.
And go through tribal initiations, right? And boys need male mentorship from
Yeah.
strong male role models in
Yeah.
order to become good men.
Let
And
me
to
let
not,
me say something quick, Joe. I think that right now we see a lot of men seeking out mentorship.
yes, yeah,
I think
but
that's a good thing. But how
the
do we get females to come down off of their empowerment trip? It seems a little more challenging.
I think honestly, the reason why that's happening,
Hmm.
everything's fractal and holistic, right? But I think that the more men that step into their masculine energy, the
Mhm.
more women are going to feel able to kind of relax into their
Yeah,
feminine,
I
right?
agree.
These women can't trust their men because the men are beta, right?
Right. But we,
They're
we as feminine also contributed to that beta energy with our empowerment movements. So it's kind of both.
yeah,
We're both at fault.
it's both. But if the men decide
Mhm,
that they're
mhm.
going to step into their masculine alpha energy,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It will create the balance again. You know what I mean?
Listen, I just told you that. I just told you that. I said by me healing my masculine, I now see my masculine as masculine and I've settled in my feminine.
Right.
So it
Right.
is the masculine. It is the masculine that needs to rise and come into
Yeah.
the strength to let the feminine it happens like simultaneously, but I do think
Yeah.
right now is the men being called right
Hmm.
now, this whole rona going on. I think this is the male's time to really come into
Yeah.
the authentic energy.
And that involves challenge, right? Masculine energy goes through challenge. And so the men are going to be challenged, right, to
Mhm.
step up into this
Yes.
role. And it's up to them to decide whether or not they're going to be weak and afraid and not heed the call, or to step into it and step into the hero's journey and step into the unknown, right? And become who they were meant to be in the first place, right? But they have to have the courage to step into the darkness and step into the unknown.
Yeah.
And some men will, and some men will not. And that is the way it is.
Kind
you
of
know?
when you say that, it takes me very kind of galactic and global, and it makes me think of like the new earth as opposed to the old paradigm and this splitting of consciousness. And are you going to rise to the occasion? Because if you are not, you are being pushed and compressed by nature, by the Schumann, by everything else. And if
Yep.
you're not willing to step up, there will be very serious repercussions, I think.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
that's how you
Absolutely. Apathy, complacency, and willful ignorance are going to really
know.
smack you upside the head in the next year or so if you don't step into life, if you don't step into living, like
Yeah,
is really
yeah.
it is, you know. And
I think
you know,
it's going to get
frankly,
very tough for those who are in avoidance at this point, from this
yeah,
point
and
forward.
you know what, like I went through that.
Yeah.
I avoided my shit for years, and eventually it's going to catch up with you, and it is going to slap you upside the head so hard that you can't avoid it anymore, and that's what needs to happen, right?
Exactly
Uh,
what needs to happen. And that, for me, you said you avoided your shit. I did everything I could. I took action to try to deal with my shit, but I didn't realize that I was spiritually bypassing.
right? Yeah, and
I was like,
that's
oh, I'm a yoga master. I could put my foot behind my head. I'm a yoga teacher. I have 3 yoga studios. Like, of course, I'm good. I was taking all this action, but I wasn't going within.
well, the new age gets people in this heady, rational place, right, where they're able to like, especially if you're in your feminine, right? The
Yeah.
toxic feminine, right, finds a way to rationalize a way around everything you throw at them, right? It's like you're like, hey, look at this thing right here, and they're like, well, no, that's actually not true because this. I had a friend that did this.
The
Like I was,
bypassing is really obvious.
what's that?
The bypassing is really obvious to me now.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. Well,
even,
they're polarizing themselves, and
yeah,
to anybody who's actually balanced, it's like, hey, do you realize like that you need to come back down to earth and come down and play with the rest of us here? You
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's that was a tremendous journey for me to descend back to earth.
Yeah,
And I realized when I did, I mean, it was hard, but I realized, whoa, like I was actually super arrogant in a lot of those thoughts and actions I was taking. But that's another
yeah,
story. We should talk about that one day. And and even for me, like I know that I'm an exceptional yoga and meditation instructor, but I'm very difficult for me to go back. I teach now, not right now because of what's going on, but it's very hard for me because of who I was then.
yeah,
It's almost one of those things where I don't know if I'm really meant to go back to doing that, even though I know it's beneficial. But me in that for so long, stuck and not looking at myself, like, oh, it's really hard to think about going back there.
yeah, yeah. I get it. I totally get it.
So, Joe, I think we've been going for quite a while. So, in order to,
Yeah. No, I actually I was gonna ask if we could wrap things up like 20
yeah,
minutes ago. We kept
yeah,
talking about some cool
yeah,
stuff,
I
but
think this was really great and informative, and I hope that I was able to offer a true account of some of the crap I did to my feminine, and
yeah,
and also to kind of end up with that, little love letter to my feminines, and to
I
everyone
really,
out there. Huh?
yeah. I said I really appreciated that. I'm sure some of the other people will as well. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So to everybody who maybe is now going through this right now, I just want to say, keep going, keep releasing the expectations, keep surrendering, and you'll know. I knew very clearly when I was coming more full circle in healing that masculine energy within me, and it's such a knowing where you realize you'll work daily to stay and not default because it just feels right. It's that energy of home. It's that energy of, this is the woman I came here to be, and I'm willing to let my man lead. And it's just a very comforting, nurturing, beautiful feeling.
Hmm. Well, um, I don't really have a response.
That's okay.
So,
We'll talk again.
um, yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Stephanie, and thank you everybody for hanging out with us and watching the video. And I hope that this was informative.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you, everybody.
yeah, thank you.
All right, guys.
So,
Anything else, Joe?
um,
We'll have
no,
information listed below on the video if any of you guys want to get in touch with either of us. Both Joe and I do coaching. I'm kind of a little incognito with it right now, but if you need help or want to talk to somebody, I will also do that. Yeah, so we'll leave information below, and I'm sure we'll get back on air soon.
yep. Hope
Okay.
I'm looking forward to
All right.
it.
Bye, everybody.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below and click the icon to your left to subscribe. New content every week about spirituality and addiction from myself, Joe Fortin. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.